Keegan, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. Very, very kind. I appreciate it very, very much. Certainly better than an introduction I received once. I used to represent Dayton, Ohio, and so I'd fly back from Washington, D.C. and give a report on what happened that week in Washington, D.C., and my friend was introducing me, and he got so excited when he was introducing me. He kept saying, "We're going to get the latest information about Washington from Tony Hall, and it's going to be really exciting." But he got his words mixed up, and he introduced me by saying, "Let's hear from the latest dope from Washington, D.C." And that was me. That's how I was introduced. So Keegan, by far, your introduction was so nice and so kind. Thank you very, very much. Today, I want to talk to you about what Keegan and what all of you have been studying, what your papers were about. I want to talk to you about hunger. I want to talk to you about humanitarian concerns. I want to give an assessment of where we are and hopefully give you evidence of why we should have a direct stake in the issue of food security. Now, you hear a lot about what is food security. The definition of food security means that all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. We all have a direct stake in this, all of us in America. Why? For most of us, it's a moral issue. It's the right thing to do, to care for our neighbor, to care for our friends, to care for people that are hurting. Some of us are led by faith to respond. I think that's probably the thing that keeps me involved with this issue for 35 years is the faith of it. There's over 2,500 verses in the scripture dealing with the issue of the poor, the sick, the hungry, the orphans, the widows, the alien. And it's very clear that if you read the scriptures or are a person of faith, that God is very clear. He wants us involved. The third issue, the third reason is that it's a very serious national security issue. These are the words from the National Security Strategy of the U.S., and I'm quoting. This world is a world where some live in comfort and plenty, where half of the human lives live on or less than $2 a day is neither just nor stable. This is an example of a madrasa school in Pakistan. And when I was in Pakistan, I talked to a farmer, and he was telling me that he sent his son to this madrasa school. I said, "Why do you do this?" I said, "Most of these madrasa schools teach hate. They teach hate about America." I said, "Why do you do this?" He said, "I do this," he says, "I really don't like what they teach, but they feed my son, they board my son, they educate my son, they take care of all of his needs, his clothes, and everything." He said, "That's what we have to compete against." Maybe some of you like numbers. If you do, let me give you the current picture of domestic and global hunger. The U.S. has we have an approximate population of 300 million people, and 48 million people are hungry, or what we call food insecure. That's 15% of our people. Now, it's not the kind of hunger, our hunger in America is not the kind of hunger that I've seen in North Korea. It's not the kind of hunger that you'll see in the Congo or Sudan. I mean, people are not dropping over dead, but they are going to bed hungry 2 and 3 days every month in this country to the tune of about 48 million people. And these are women and children and mostly senior citizens. These are people on fixed incomes like senior citizens, like a couple that I met not too long ago. I was in Southeast Ohio, and I was talking to a couple, an elderly couple. They were both in their late 70s. She had cancer. They were both living on Social Security. That was the extent of their money coming in. And she had cancer, so everything that was coming in every month was going to cure her cancer. So they didn't have money for food or really anything. When I met them, they were stretching a can of tomato soup for 2 weeks. That's in Southeast Ohio. Women and children, even working poor women, once they get done paying their bills, their rent, their daycare bill, their transportation bill, many of them, they run out of money 2 or 3 days before the end of the month. They find themselves going to food banks and soup kitchens. And 17 million children are food insecure. 1 million people in this country are chronically hungry. Sodexo, which is one of the most respected food services companies in the world. It's a large company. They're a member of my organization. My organization is, I have a nonprofit, part of a nonprofit organization called the Alliance to End Hunger in Washington, D.C. Sodexo is a member. They did a large study. They concluded that hunger in America now costs Americans $167 billion a year. This does not include the SNAP program, which is the food stamp program. It does not include federal nutrition programs. So in 2010, when they did this survey, hunger cost every American $542. The study was an exhaustive economic analysis. It looked at malnutrition, hospitalization, diminished incomes, outcomes in education, suicide, depression, absenteeism, and cost to charities. Now let's look at the global picture. 25,000 people will die today. 25,000 people will die today. 25,000 died yesterday. 25,000 will die tomorrow. And they're going to die of hunger. Or they're going to die of hunger and hunger-related diseases. Hunger won't kill you. What kills you is when you don't eat over a period of days, your immune system goes down. When your immune system goes down, you're very susceptible to diseases in the world, diseases that in America we licked a long time ago. Polio, whooping cough, diphtheria, those kind of diseases. But in developing nations, many of the countries that you did reports on, they have not licked these diseases. And so if they don't eat, if you don't eat for days, your immune system goes down, you're very susceptible to these diseases. You get these diseases, 25,000 people will die today from hunger and hunger-related diseases. These numbers are depressing, but there is some good news. And I want you to understand this. The percentage of hungry people in the world today has dropped from 34% to 17% in the last 40 years. I used to say when I started working on this program 35 years ago that today 42,000 people are going to die today. Now it's 25,000 people. It's still a lot of people, but I'm telling you, the number of people that are dying every day has come down. Another statistic that you need to remember is over half, we are cutting the poverty rate in half in this world. The programs that you have been talking about, that you have heard about, are working. These things that we are doing overseas, like school feeding and immunization and sanitation and digging wells and microcredit and agriculture programs and better seeds, better fertilizers, they work. They save lives. We just need more of it. Let me tell you a little bit about my personal story and why I'm so passionate about this issue. I was in the Peace Corps. I was in the country of Thailand many years ago. I think that probably gave me a perspective, living in a different nation, living in a very poor way, speaking a different language, looking at poverty from that aspect. I never grew up in poverty. I was never, my family was a pretty moderate family from the standpoint of income. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. And so I didn't know anything about poverty until I actually went and experienced it in the Peace Corps. Then you heard a little bit about my background, and then I was elected. I was in the state legislature. I was a small businessman. Then I was in the U.S. Congress. I became chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger, and my job was to go and see various things in the world and report back to the Congress what I had seen, and to ask the Congress to get involved with these issues to help. Well, the first trip I took, the first major trip I took was to Ethiopia in 1984, way before many of you were born, but they were having a major famine then. And actually it started with a drought. The drought turned into a civil war. The civil war turned into a famine. And 1 million people were dying every day. 1 million people every day in one country. That was hard for me to understand. How can this happen? How can 1 million people die every day in one country? And we couldn't understand it. We kept reading these reports, and nobody had been to Ethiopia from the United States in those early months of 1984, late 83. So I decided, as chairman of the committee, I wanted to understand this. I've never seen anything like this. Let's go and take a look. And so I went to Ethiopia, and I went with Mother Teresa's group, Sisters of Charity. We went up country to this plateau area where Mother Teresa had a small clinic. It was about 2 hours by small plane from Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. And we landed, and we went into the small clinic. The clinic was probably half the size of this room, in the middle of nowhere, a rural area. And I noticed thousands of people were outside the clinic wanting to get in. And as I walked in, there was 2 nuns there and a traveling doctor, and he said, "I don't think you've ever seen anything like this, but come with me outside. These people have been walking, in many cases, well over 100 miles. They haven't eaten for days. They're starving. Their immune system is down. And they've come here thinking that we had food and medicines, and they're all dehydrated, and we can only take care of about 5 of them, and there must have been 3,000 or 4,000 people outside." So as I walked outside, they all began to just sit down and lay down, and they they were sick, and they were tired. And as I walked among them, their mothers handed me their babies, and many of their babies were dead. And they thought I was a doctor. They thought that I could help them. They thought I could cure their doctors or cure their kids and bring them back to life. And geez, I've never seen anything like this. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. And I saw 25 children die in a matter of 15 minutes. And for the next 3 days, this is what I saw. I saw death. I saw death as a result of hunger, as a result of malnutrition, as a result of dehydration. And I came back from that experience flying back to the Congress because I had this report that I had to give to Congress to tell them about, that we needed to help. And I decided, because I was so stunned by it, that this was going to be my life. This was what I was going to do. This was what I was going to devote my life to, this issue of hunger. Let me show you a couple other pictures. This is a school feeding. The reason why school feeding is so important is it gets kids back in school. It gets the boys back in school, but we want the girls back in school too. And the reason, a lot of times, because so many of these rural communities or so many of these developing nations, 80% of the jobs are agriculture. And as a result of that, the families, they need their kids to work with them in the field. And so they oftentimes don't let them go to school. But if we send food there, that's fortified food with vitamins and nutrients, the parents will send their kids there because it's one less meal. And we fortify this food in such a way where they really, this is very healthy food. And they'll send both their boy and their girl there. This is one of the ways we compete against madrasa schools that teach hate. We have to compete against this. When people are hungry, when people are out of work, they are very susceptible for these terrorist groups. So if we can help feed people, if we can help nourish people, if we can help the parents and the children. So this is a school feeding project, and that's what it looks like. That's fortified food there. This is an example of malnutrition. You'll see the skin there. You'll see ulcers on the skin. Sometimes you'll see kids that'll have big stomachs. You'll think, why do they have big stomachs? They haven't been eating. Well, they have big stomachs because of germs and they get bloated and ulcers and things like that. But that's ulcers on the skin there. This is me in North Korea when I was much younger. I've been to North Korea 8 times. North Korea is probably, you don't hear a lot about North Korea, about their hunger problem, mainly because you mostly hear about their nuclear problem. They're always threatening, they have the nuclear weapon and they're always threatening South Korea, they're threatening everybody else. But the fact is, it's probably the worst country in the world for hunger. They used to have 28 million people population. They're now down to 23 million. That many people have died from hunger, or they have been put into what they call concentration camps, gulags. The people are starving, and they're stunted. And you get stunted in your health mainly because in the first 1,000 days of your birth, if you don't have the proper nutrition, your brain doesn't develop, your body doesn't develop, and there are so many people in North Korea that are stunted. It would be, as you walk among them, except for the guards that they have at the DMZ, all the soldiers and everybody are very short in North Korea. I've seen people in North Korea eating weeds and bark, twigs. They grind it together. They put a little flour, and they make noodles. But you can't digest it. And so you go to the hospital, and everybody's got stomach problems because they can't digest it. And every time I go to a hospital in North Korea, I say, I'd like to see your pharmacy. You go to the pharmacy, and there's no drugs. It's all herbs and cow horns and roots. This is what's in their pharmacy. I've seen people being operated. There's no anesthesia. There's no antibiotics. It's a mess. But you don't hear about this. You don't put a body outside. Somebody dies in your family in North Korea. You put a body outside, it's gone the next morning. It's cannibalism there. It's how bad it is in North Korea. And now that's a country with real hunger problems, but you don't hear that very often. This is famine in North Korea. See those kids there? I've seen kids this high that are like 14, 15, 16 years old. That's stunting. It's North Korea. So what happened was I came back from Ethiopia. I was really turned on because I saw all this horrendous destruction of people. I began to travel and legislate in Congress. We passed a lot of legislation. And so I began to travel so much. Keegan said I've been to over 100 nations. I've actually been to 130 nations. And I began to travel so much that my district in Dayton, Ohio, they began to say to me, Tony, you're traveling a lot. You care more about Ethiopia or North Korea than you do Dayton, Ohio. Who needs you? I'm thinking, uh-oh, I got a problem here. I got my staff together. I said, there's a perception in politics that even though the perception might be wrong, if you don't change the perception, people will believe it. I said, they think that I care more about North Korea than I do them. And I said, we have to bring this issue of hunger, malnutrition, development assistance back home here to Dayton, Ohio, Montgomery County. And so we studied my district for the longest time, and we found out what the problems was. We appointed a committee. We got businesses and nonprofits together. And first thing we did is we did a 40-hour fast. And for 40 hours, I got people to fast with me. I had 4,000 people that fasted with me, and so for every hour that they would fast, we drank fruit juice and water. For every hour you'd fast, you'd get somebody to back you, $1, quarter, 50 cents, whatever. And over the weekend, we raised $280,000 for the food banks in Dayton, Ohio, and Montgomery County. And we have 66 food banks and soup kitchens in those days. Half of the money stayed there, went to the food banks, and the other half went overseas. If you wanted to go to Rwanda, to the Baptists in Rwanda, we'd send it. If you wanted to go through the Catholic Relief Services, or to World Vision, or to CARE, or Oxfam, whoever you wanted it to, we'd write the check for you. And the important thing is that we got a lot of people to participate, and it was the start of our programs to kind of educate and bring hunger back to my district and start to educate my district. We did a gleaning program, and this is a picture of a gleaning program. Gleaning is a biblical term. Gleaning is actually from the Old Testament. Gleaning means that you are allowed to go into the fields of the farmers and pick whatever they don't want. If the farmers permit you to go into the what happens? I did something wrong here. I want to go back. Yeah. Gleaning allows you to go into the fields and pick what the farmers don't want. So in Dayton, Ohio, we had a lot of farming friends, and one fruit farmer, he allowed me to pick strawberries and whatever he had at harvest time. And one time, we had a field of corn, and he said, just take the whole field. And I said, why? Can't you sell this corn? He said, I can't sell it. It's imperfect corn. Americans won't buy this. He said, you can have it. I said, I got to plow it under, or crows will eat it. Anyway, we did this for 15 years. We had hundreds of people in the field of harvesting. And the good thing about it is when you get a bunch of people in the field and you're picking corn together and strawberries, it's fun. It's enjoyable. It builds relationships. And you take it down to a central warehouse, and then it's called in, and all these food banks and soup kitchens, they have to come down in their trucks and pick it up. And that's gleaning. Then we did a senior citizen feeding program where during the cold winter months, we would take food out to senior citizens on the weekend. And we used the Senior Citizen Center. All this was free. This was all donated by businesses. The federal government didn't give 1 cent. We didn't ask them. It was all done locally, privately. that program lasted about 15 years, and then we did a pickup of food programs because, you know, country clubs are now calling me, and restaurants and hotels, and we have a big base in near Montgomery County called the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and you know they have all this food, and they donated it to us, so we would pick it up every day, take it down to a central warehouse, and the call would go out, and it would go out, and these food banks and soup kitchens would come in and pick it up. I just tell you this because what happened is we built the constituency, and I had done a poll in my district when I first started, asking the people in Montgomery County, 600,000. I said, rank these issues, will you, for me? You know, one issue was jobs, another issue is the deficit, another issue is terrorism. How important are they? And hunger and poverty was on that list. I had 20 issues. Rank them from 1, most important, to 20, least important. Well, poverty and hunger ranked 18 and 19. After I served there 24 years, and after doing these programs, I did the same poll. I think it was the 24th year, just before I retired, and we did the same poll, and I asked them to rank these issues. And poverty and hunger ranked number 2 and 3. You can change people's minds. You can make a difference. And I think that's one of the things I want to conclude some of my remarks today, is that you can change the mind of elected officials. You can change the mind of your parents and your friends. What you're doing is very, very, very important. Don't give up. It's really, really important. The best untold story of the last decade may be the story of Africa. Real income has increased more than 30%. Reversing 2 decades of decline. 7 of the world's 10 fasting growing economies are in Africa. The GDP is expected to rise 6% per year in the next decade. HIV infections are down nearly 40% in sub-Saharan Africa. Malaria deaths among children have declined 50%. And child mortality rates are falling, and life expectancy is increasing. 10 years ago, you could not say this. A lot of people had written off Africa. So these programs are working. People ask me, do you think you're making a difference in all of the years that you've put in? And my answer is yes, absolutely. I remember a reporter asked Mother Teresa, don't you think that what you're doing is a drop in the bucket? Can you imagine a reporter asking Mother Teresa this? And she said, no, what I do is a drop in the ocean. But if I didn't do it, it'd be one less drop. So don't ever think that what you're doing here today, the papers that you've written, what you're learning about hunger and development assistance is not important. It is important. You'll retain this the rest of your life. And it is important to really push this argument and push this issue and be on top of this. We can make a difference, and you can save people's lives. You can actually make a difference. And that's the great thing about this. This is an example of some of the good programs that are going on, growing projects in Guatemala, Africa, Ghana. That's when I met with Mother Teresa 7 or 8 times, and she said to me, when I first met her, I went downtown with her in Calcutta, and she said, we were downtown, and there was just people on top of one another, living on top of one another, very squalid, very poor area of Calcutta. And I said something like, I'm supposed to know something about hunger, but where does one start in a situation like this? And she didn't say anything to me at the time, but there was a man lying in the street there, and she got some men to pick that person up, take him home. She took him home to his hospice, and she began to wash him off and love him, touch him, speak to him. She came back to me later in the afternoon, and she said to me, not everybody can come to Calcutta like you. I want you to always remember and tell everybody, do the thing that's in front of you. Her point that she was saying is, we don't have to go to Calcutta to make a difference. What's going on in your backyard? What's going on with your next door neighbor? What's going on in your school? What's going on that needs to be done? Do the thing that's in front of you. And her point was, if everybody did the thing that's in front of them in this world, probably half the stuff we do in government we wouldn't need to do. And that was her take, and I agree. So what can you do? These are just very general things. You can contact your member of Congress. You can explore hunger in your district. So many of these things you're already doing. You're way ahead of the curve, kind of speaking to the choir here. But don't be afraid to approach the decision makers, people that are elected. Actually, you know as much about hunger as they do. A lot of them do not look at this issue. There's not a lot of voices for hungry and poor people. We need your voice, and we need your attention to this. You can make a difference. You really can. Thank you.